Hi everybody, I'm Sammy Strutt, Head of Member Development for BIGGA, and I'd like to welcome you to this Continue to Learn Extra webinar. I'm pleased to welcome Steve Flanagan, Technical Director for Indigrow. Today, Steve will be providing an overview of research work relating to 3 biostimulant products. As a vital part of many programs, Indigrow have been looking at sustainable, biodegradable biostimulant alternatives to be used in an integrated approach for turf maintenance and management. Steve has been involved in plant nutrition within amenity horticulture and agriculture sectors for over 30 years. His work has regularly involved trialling new products across a broad range of crops in several countries, encompassing a diverse range of soils and climates. He is a FACTS qualified advisor, a regular examiner of FACTS panels for BASIS, and has an MSc in Agri-Food from the University of Nottingham. Please feel free to ask questions via the chat function at the bottom or top of your screen, and we will pose the questions on your behalf. If that's okay with you, Steve, I will hand over and I will disappear from your screen.
Okay, thank you. Hello, and welcome to the webinar. As Sammy pointed out, we're going to discuss several biostimulants this afternoon, and this will be an overview of these biostimulants. We've picked them because we think some are very topical at the moment in terms of the Osmotic protectants, and also some new biostimulants. We've got the beneficial element titanium, and a very interesting one, the Chitosan. So these will be covered in a very broad detail, and the overview will take into account peer-reviewed papers which are available, and also they will take into account some trials work which is being carried out on these different biostimulants. So firstly, let's look at what biostimulants actually are and what the European Biostimulants Industry Council categorized them as. So plant biostimulants contain substances and or microorganisms whose function, when applied to plants or the rhizosphere, is to stimulate the natural processes to enhance or benefit nutrient uptake, nutrient efficiency, tolerance to abiotic stress, and crop quality. In our case, we're looking at quality amenity turf. And why I've highlighted these areas of the definition is because today we'll be looking at basically substances. We won't be looking at microorganisms, and we'll be looking at the foliar application to plants, not the rhizosphere. It will incorporate information about nutrient uptake, nutrient efficiency, and definitely tolerance to abiotic stress. So firstly, we're looking at quality sports and amenity turf, and here you will see a profile of some turf, and this is the environment that we're dealing with. It's the turf environment we have to contend with, and generally this is based on a coarse sand material. This is primarily for drainage, to give us good drainage so we've got playing throughout the seasons. And also this leads to some other issues in terms of water holding capacity. It's generally low, because if you want good drainage, you've got low water holding capacity. So in terms of that then, we need some options in terms of biostimulants to help with the water holding capacity and the water usage. Also leads to low cation exchange capacity. So this is our nutrient situation, where it's at low nutrient holding capacity, and they will drain through. So there's a serious amount of management needed for both water and nutrients in terms of maintaining the quality turf in a condition that we need for aesthetics, and also in terms of the recovery, etc. So I think it would be fair to say that we are definitely in the last few years, in the last decade, in a climate of extremes. And this provides many additional challenges to us all, because generally we're out in that environment, trying to work in it. We go from the extremes of the beast from the east to almost arid desert-like conditions, and to summer floods. So your guess is as good as mine what type of weather we're going to get, and planning for that is a real major job, which will challenge anybody in terms of maintaining turf. So I see it like this. We've got this environment that we've made for the turf. It is a man-made environment generally, this coarse sand base. We've taken out a lot of the organic minerals and things that nature would normally have in there. And that balance, we have to balance up between the environment, the environmental pressures on that turf, and also we need to balance that with some biostimulants. By no means am I leaving out anything in terms of the strategic planning in terms of granular fertilizers. They're a must. These biostimulants work alongside as a complementary added management tool to get more out of what you apply in terms of nutrients, in terms of water management, etc. And that's where we have, you are pivotal to the whole system in terms of your management, knowing the environment, knowing what the biostimulants can do. That's what today's broader overview and approach is about, is knowing where these biostimulants fit and where they can help. So firstly, we're looking at abiotic stress. This abiotic stress can come in at any time throughout the year. With the changes in the environment, the temperature changes and the moisture changes, precipitation, any point you can create stress, and this can manifest itself in many ways within the turf. So we're going to look at osmolytes as a way of helping with that abiotic stress. Then, as I said earlier, nutrient use efficiency, working alongside current programs of granular programs, whether it's slow release, controlled release, or maybe liquid fertilized later. These nutrient use efficiency in terms of biostimulants, we're looking at a new, what I think is fairly unique to many people, beneficial element of titanium. And then lastly, we've got abiotic and biotic stress per se generally. And we're looking at something which is not a new product by any means, but in terms of sports amenity turf, it's something that is becoming more apparent and will be used, I think, much more in the future. So firstly, osmotic protectants or osmolytes. These are categorized as small organic molecules with a neutral charge, low toxicity at high concentrations that act as osmolytes. Now, we'll all be familiar with several osmolytes, but I mean, potassium comes to mind. That's an inorganic osmolyte, which has been used for many years and people would be familiar with. But we're going to look at osmolytes in terms of the organic type, and we're looking at amino acid-based biostimulants. These are naturally produced by the plants and they provide stress relief, and also the osmolytes will induce some beneficial amino acids as well. So these are naturally produced by the plants to combat abiotic stresses, which we'll look at detail in a moment. And they're favoured in their production under water deficit and salt stress, as they provide stress tolerance to cells without interfering with the actual cell function. And this is quite important because what we want to do is keep the turf maintain its normal functionality, etc., while these products help in terms of the salt stress and the water deficit stress. That's why they become useful and don't interfere with the normal metabolism. So these osmolyte compounds, they can be found in very high levels in plant species which are naturally occurring because they have high levels due to the harsh environments, particularly saline and drought conditions. So things such as maritime species have got beets, etc. They produce large amounts of these osmolytes to contend with the environmental conditions that they live in. This is the section on abiotic stress. So many of you will be familiar with a number of these types of stress. Heat stress. Last year we had one of the hottest days on record. So heat stress become a big issue generally. Salinity stress, this can come about in terms of dealing with water management and drought stress as well. And you get these build-up of salinity problems. And again, drought stress. We've just had the driest May on record, I believe. Some places have not had moisture for about 40 days. So drought stress is a real issue. We've got sophisticated systems to deal with this, but it's still an issue. And again, other areas of cold stress. We've got other issues there like light stress and heavy metal stress, less important to us here. But it could be the fluctuation between these different types of stress. We get this very changeable. I appreciate soil temperatures and things are different to air temperatures and that, but changes in the environment bring on these times of stress within the turf, and it can change the growth patterns. It can cause problems. You can get this total breakdown. So that's why these are important to us. This manifests itself as oxidative stress within the plant, and the osmolytes are accumulated within the plant. So there's a whole host of these type of osmolytes. We've got glycine beta, we talked about beta earlier, polyamines, they're just multiple amine groups together. Polyols, this will be familiar to many people because it's in seaweeds. That contains mannitol, which is osmolyte, contains other amino acids which also help. We've got sugars and proline. Proline will be something familiar to many people in terms of drought stress. So these osmolytes, they accumulate within the cells, and what they're doing in cells to correct this abiotic stress, well, there's a couple of jobs really they have in there. One is to balance up the osmotic potential within the cell so that it's protecting its water and the inner cell. And the other is to stop reactive oxygen species. These are molecules which are charged, and they're like hydroxyl molecules, peroxides, so singlet oxygen. So these can cause damage within the cells. We could go into more detail later, but basically the osmolytes actually quench them. So they're mopping them up and stopping that damage, which is the second big thing they need to do in terms of abiotic stress tolerance. So that leads to the stress tolerance within the plant. So this is the background to how these osmolytes deal with the abiotic stresses we get. So to go through this, the osmoprotectants, osmolytes, help overcome plant stress and aid recovery by, firstly, osmotic regulation. So this is the battle between the outer cell with high salts like calcium, magnesium, sodiums, etc., and inside trying to retain the water within the cells and bolster that osmotic potential. Secondly, cell membrane protection, and it's protecting the cell membrane by stopping these free radicals, as they're called, or reactive oxygen species, because they're damaging the internal organelles within the cells, and they eventually, because they mop them up, they're protecting the photosynthetic biochemical pathways and maintaining the normal metabolism of the cell, which is what we need. They also stimulate the plant's natural production of amino acids. So the plant will put energy, or the cell will put energy into proline production, which obviously proline is a cyclical molecule, and it helps in terms of the cell protection. So we'll look at a bit more detail into what what happens with the plant under stress, what affects its physiology. We talked about the free radicals. These are these very reactive components which bounce around inside the cell, cause damage to DNA, cell membrane, and it can cause eventually the cells to senesce and die, cause a lot of damage. and this is what manifests itself in our turf. Lipid peroxidation is the oxidative degradation of lipids. So this is causing cell membrane damage. So hydroxyl molecules, and they're basically stealing or taking electrons from the lipids in the cell membrane, and it results in ultimately cell damage, which is what we don't wish for. So this is why it's so important that we preempt these abiotic stressful conditions, and we can use these biostimulant osmolytes to rectify. So to summarize this in terms of getting the balance right within the cell, you've got several things that can cause this, whether it's saline or drought conditions. You can see that there's a dynamic water movement in there, and we want to keep inside the cell the balance of the osmotic potential to maintain the cell structure, to maintain turgidity in the cell. But then also a dual thing is we've got to reduce the reactive oxygen species within the cell as well, which is what these osmolytes are able to do. And the result is to maintain healthy metabolic functions. So we are helping to the normal processes continue within the turf, and you're not getting this check in growth or senescence because you're helping it with the biostimulant osmolytes. So you're helping that to be maintained. So to cover this, we need to look at some trial work. This is independent trials work which is being carried out on osmoprotectant product, and there were two treatments. Treatment one is obviously a control. It's got a standard NPK fertilizer, and the treatment two was the same NPK fertilizer plus the osmoprotectant. Both products were applied at the same rates. As you can see, there's 150 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen, 60 kilograms per hectare of phosphate, and 150 kilograms per hectare of potassium. This was split into 3 applications. It was mown to 35 millimeters every 7 days, and the data was recorded every 21 days. This was to sort of mimic a normal regime on the turf. And these are the results. You can see there is quite a significant difference in the ground cover. It goes right up to around 12 weeks after the sowing, which is a major benefit when you're trying to establish this. In terms of vigor, again, we see dropping off at around 15 weeks, but good vigor throughout. This would be seen to be when different applications were made, so these peaks and dips. And growth and recovery, something which we need in terms of the maintenance and the traffic, etc., which happens on a lot of turf and just general usage. You know, growth and recovery is very important. And here we see this carries right on to 21 weeks. This is the bit where I find it's most probably the most important area, because I believe in terms of the root density, if we have a much more significant root density and biomass in the root, then you've got the ability to obtain more moisture more efficiently and more nutrients, and therefore it would lead to the more positive results that we've had earlier. So I think this is one of the most crucial and key factors within the what these osmotic products do. So in terms of a trial summary, we can see that it encourages better turf establishment, higher vigor, promotes faster recovery from stress, and increased root density, which again I say is very important in this, and overall improvement in plant health through stress reduction. So this product, I believe, is enabling the turf to utilize the nutrients and water available much better by being able to reduce that stress and increase the use efficiency of both nutrient and water. And this was a totally independent trial, and this is from Sweden, and it was actually out in the open on the green. And you can see here on the left-hand side, this is a treated area with the similar fertilizer with the osmoprotectant, and on the right there was just the fertilizer. And you can see aesthetically there is quite a difference between that in terms of, one, the colour, but also in terms of the coverage. I think you'll agree on that. So in summary, osmoprotectants and their potential benefits to be used in terms of sports amenity turf, I would suggest they got increased plant health overall. It creates a healthy sward to maintain a good firm playing surface, greater resistance to disease, higher density to outcompete with weeds and stop encroachment, doesn't leave the door open, and resilience and recovery from perturbation. The amount of work that is carried out, and also the traffic generally, would lead this to be one of the most important parts of these products. Second product is a review of the beneficial element titanium, and I believe this is fairly unique. Certainly of late, it's not to my knowledge been used on amenity sports turf before. I know there are some trials on currently, or ongoing trials in America on titanium on greens, and also last year there were some trials of the titanium in the UK. And this is why it's become quite an exciting opportunity. I think it's uncharted territory. It's something that might in the future prove to be a real opportunity for nutrient use efficiency. So titanium, it is a proven beneficial element, and it's been used for over 100 years, mainly in Eastern Europe and mainly on agriculture and horticultural crops, although there have been some trials on grass species. It's the 10th most abundant element. It's generally unavailable though, in the form it is. The peer-reviewed papers would indicate that it increases chlorophyll content across many crops, including grasses. There was trials done on Timothy. It promotes the uptake of iron and magnesium. It optimizes the photosystem efficiency of the different crops and plants, and stimulates nitrate reductase activity. So overall, increased nutrient use efficiency is what we are reading from the peer-reviewed papers. And there are new positive research in place on the uses on sports amenity turf, which going forward will be, I think, very beneficial as we get more of that information through. So I make no excuses for this slide. It's primarily been used on high-value agriculture and horticultural crops, as I said. But in terms of its being a beneficial nutrient, this has been seen for many years now. And the first thing it does is increases nitrate reductase, or stimulates enzyme activities, as it says there. Iron and magnesium is increased in terms of its uptake. And increased chlorophyll. Now, why would these supposed to be important for sports amenity turf? Well, I think it is important for potential beneficial element for sports amenity turf, because we would want to use our nitrogen applications and iron and magnesium availability, all those nutrients are key, I believe, and the increased chlorophyll as well. I think they're all facets of this product that would benefit in terms of sports amenity turf. So how does this all work? It's to do with the interaction between titanium and iron. And there's a lot of words here, but titanium is both synergistic at low levels and antagonistic at high levels of iron. So what we're saying here is that the titanium and the iron, they compete for ligands and protein sites. So basically within the plant cells and the sap and that, there are these ligands, these organic molecules which transport metals around within the plant. And if there's a high level of iron, then it occupies a lot of the sites and titanium can't basically get in. That's why this would, going forwards, not suit where there is huge levels of iron being applied previously. It might be seen that the products, this particular titanium doesn't work, but actually when the iron is not abundant or totally available at a high level, titanium will occupy these sites. When the titanium does do that, the plant identifies the titanium's there, and it triggers this natural defensive mechanism for the plant to protect itself. So firstly, it increases its nitrate reductase activity because it's wanting to build itself, it's wanting more nitrogen, more bioavailable nitrogen to produce a biomass, to grow. Secondly, it then stimulates the active uptake of iron and magnesium to occupy these ligand sites so titanium cannot occupy them. Well, there's varying theories on this, and you read different papers on it. I think it could be just the basic fact that the plant is wanting to stimulate its metabolism to build biomass, to grow itself out of the situations. Therefore, it's taking up the iron and the magnesium, because obviously that's effective in terms of metabolism. And then finally, this results in extra iron and magnesium being taken up from the rhizosphere, and ultimately increased chlorophyll and increased metabolism. So these are all beneficial things to the plant as it's driving itself forward out of the titanium. So here's a schematic diagram of what the titanium is believed to do. Again, this is from peer-reviewed papers. It's a very busy slide, so I've broken it down into a few important or relevant sections that I believe. So we've got this initial section here where titanium enters the plant by displacing the magnesium and the iron by titanium. So this triggers these internal defense reactions, and the plant decides it's got to increase its nitrogen uptake, hence the nitrogen reductase. It's building bioavailable nitrogen, increase biomass basically. Then as well as this, it's increasing chlorophyll production. And this is also leading to increased iron and magnesium uptake within the plant. So this is all driving good nutrient usage. So it's increasing nutrient efficiency and increased metabolism and biomass. Again, how does this look in reality in a trial? So there have been some trials carried out. They're still ongoing, not published because they're not complete. Last year was a very challenging year for any trials, I believe, with the weather we had throughout the season that the trials were due in. But anyway, trials were taking place. This was done on a site which grows quality turf. It was done in a randomized block design for replicates. So basically, what I'm saying is there was a control, so that was standard nutrition that would be on the turf anyway, and they started from the start of the turf. Then we had 3 different replicates that are available here. That was a low rate, a medium rate, and a recommended rate of titanium. Over and above this, there were some phytotoxicity trials at the same site, just to see if several times the recommended rate did cause any adverse damage at all. There was nothing whatsoever. There was no adverse problems. So there was several different samples taken. It was relied on a colorimeter for some. Then there was actual samples of material sent off to laboratories for chlorophyll analysis, and also that we used a green index field scout meter. And this is the net result of the initial work, was to produce it is significant, and it's surprised in a way in terms of how the trials were under pressure, and also because of the timing of the trial. It was at optimum conditions, really. Chlorophyll production, you would expect, would be high anyway. So initial results look very favourable considering the circumstances. So there's a high overall result, and as you can see, as you read the bar across, it was a significant difference over the control. So this is just the field situation, the trials. And some of the testing equipment. As I say, there were many tests done, and that the overall average was in favour of an increase. So key points of titanium: has the potential to be used as a foliar-applied beneficial nutrient to increase nutrient uptake, to further enhance the organoleptic properties of quality sports turf. What we mean by organoleptic, it's the overall experience, the impact of not just it's that overall experience that people get, sensory experience. So this, through the increased chlorophyll, it could also be used as a complementary option to reduce the reliance on certain high iron inputs, which in themselves, if we could reduce them, not completely remove them obviously, but if we could reduce the reliance on them, it may help in terms of some of the adverse anaerobic situations that result from them. You only need very low rates of the titanium. It's less than, it's around 0.5, 0.6% in the solution to get this effect. But the main issue is that titanium can't be any just titanium. It has to be an available form. It'd be broken down by weak acids and formulated properly to be plant available. It has to be plant available to have any impact whatsoever. So the combination of titanium in conjunction with granular fertilizer applications was found to enhance overall turf aesthetics. Now, we believe there have been several prestige venues have used this titanium product to see what happens in conjunction with granular fertilizer post the granular fertilizer application. And to date, the results look very favourable, very supporting of the product being able to have an impact on sports turf. So the final subject is chitin, chitosan, and chitosan oligosaccharide. So these will come clear what these are as we run through it. So chitosan. So chitosan is a foliar plant health product based on the raw material chitin. This is where chitin comes in, because chitin is the second most abundant polymer after cellulose. So it's present in the shells of arthropods and cell walls of fungi. So it's very abundant chitin. The chitin has to be processed to chitosan to increase its solubility, making the chitosan more plant available. As I say, chitin, if you can imagine arthropod shells, crab shells, etc., very, very tough. Takes a long time to break down. We need something plant available, broken down. So this is what has to happen. So chitosan is a general term for a variety of natural, sustainable biopolymers. So there's a whole group of the different types of polysaccharide come under chitosan. Glucosamine type molecules. There's a whole variety of them. And the one we're looking at is chitosan oligosaccharide. We'll call it COS from now on because that's a lot easier, less of a mouthful. It's a polymerized, more available short-chain polysaccharide exhibiting high microbial activity as part of one of its attributes. The plant health benefits include enhanced lignin production as an induced defense response, we'll talk about in more detail, and it also enhanced beneficial microbe activity. Okay, so this is where we find out the production of chitosan from chitin, which is the raw material. So as I said earlier, this comes from arthropods and the main bulk of this raw material comes from crustacea exoskeletons, crabs, all sorts of variety of crustacea. And that is a very, very hard substance. As you can imagine, it's the only protection that these organisms have, so it's got to protect them against everything. So it's very hard, fibrous material, which takes a great deal of breaking down. And this is the extraction process, because this is the important bit, really, because chitin won't do the same jobs as chitosan, and chitosan will not be as effective as a more soluble form, the chitosan oligosaccharide, or the COS. So this is why we make this differentiation within the peer-reviewed papers and the information we have available at the moment. So we have chitinous waste. As you can imagine, there is a huge amount of other byproducts on there which we need to deprotonate, so we need to remove that matter and demineralize as well what else is the structure of those shells. So that can be done two ways: chemical extraction, which is a great deal of chemical products, sodium hydroxide, some serious breaking down chemicals to make that clean that off, and also biological extraction. There's many enzymes there which have been used to demineralize, deprotonate that product. So we've got chitin then as the next step, and that has to be deacylated down to chitosan, so the removal of acetyl molecules to give us the chitosan, or the mixture of different products which make up chitosan. So we look at now what I discussed just a minute ago, the composition and function of the COS. So this is what we end up with. A chitosan oligosaccharide, again, chemical name, beta-1,4,2-amino-2-deoxy-D-glucose. It's a mouthful, but basically these are like a mixture of glucosamine and acetyl-glucose, N-acetyl-glucosamine. And this is what the molecule looks like. And we have the amino group there. And again, this comes from this crustacea. And it's the only alkaline animal fiber with positive charge in nature, which makes it fairly unique. And potentially these are some of the reasons why it has its effect, and these attributes that we're finding very useful for both agriculture, horticulture, but hopefully going forward more in sport amenity turf. So the product features, this is where we've got the interest. Firstly, it's safe and non-toxic. Now that's a big plus all round for users, for people using the sports surfaces, and for the environment. In terms of what we're dealing with nowadays, the history of some of the products we use, we need safe, non-toxic, sustainable products for the future, and this fits that bill. It's got good water solubility. Again, for any product to work effectively, this is essential. Low viscosity, a good property. And this is the most important one, it's high biological activity. The product has this biological activity, which is being reported to have many, many benefits, both in abiotic stress release, but also in terms of protection against biotic problems, which we'll have to mention because it's in all the peer-reviewed papers. So research into the costs would support its use as a sustainable biostimulant beneficial to plant health. Chitin is abundant, it's sustainable in its source, but it needs specialist processing to produce the COS, which is an effective plant available form. That's very important, we're aware of that. The oligosaccharide, the COS, is a biopolymer and it's beneficial against abiotic stress, which we'll look at some trials work in a minute, which verifies that. It's found to promote soil health by supporting beneficial microbes and reported to enhance stomatal regulation. I'm giving you an idea of, we can't look at every single attribute of these products, we just don't have the time to cover it, but I'm hoping this will give you that information to look further into it in your own time and review some of those peer-reviewed papers later to find out whether it fits with some of the situations you have yourselves. So again, the peer-reviewed papers also suggest increased plant health as an elicitor of chitinase, which is a phytoalexin. This is produced by plants as a defense mechanism, these phytoalexins, for the protection against abiotic stress, but also including viral, bacteria, fungi, and nematode damage. We'll explain that in a bit more detail shortly. So this is the area, again, abiotic research on the COS. So this is looking at some growth parameters and chlorophyll of wheat gramineae. So we're hoping this reads across to other similar species. We have here a high saline conditions creating this abiotic stress, and we've got some growth parameters, shoot length, as you can see, the control saline conditions. The difference between that and the COS treated is very significant. The root length, again, in terms of the abiotic stress of the sodium chloride, and in terms of the treated, again, hugely significant difference in root length. So looking at the chlorophyll content combined, comparing the control against the treated, this is a hugely significant increase. So again, this is a definitely could be concluded from the trial that the COS has significantly improved the physiological index of the wheat and given good abiotic stress relief in that trial. Again, this is to do with the production of enzymes which protect the plant against these reactive oxygen species or the free radicals. So here, firstly, we have the superoxide dismutase, which is against oxide species, showing here that it's a massive increase of this beneficial enzyme is caused by the COS to protect against the abiotic stress. And then peroxidase activity, the peroxidase to go against the free radicals, peroxides, again, a significant increase. So it's producing these enzyme effect within the cells to protect because of the application of the COS. And this is a very interesting piece of information about how these oligosaccarides trigger these immune responses within plants. And this is more to do with the fungi and bacteria, as you can see it there. There's a very interesting theory in terms of the COS enters the leaf, and because it has got chitinous or chitosan material in it, the plant feels it's being invaded by maybe insects which have chitinous mouth part, and also it could be the chitin from the fungi. So it triggers this immune response, a systemic induced response. And this creates the plant to build its internal defenses, and lignin production takes place. And this produces a increased cell wall protection from the lignin. And this has been well reported. It's like a vaccine effect, I've been told, in terms of how it makes the plant respond. So the chitin that we apply triggers the reaction that the plant feels it's being attacked by these other organisms which have chitin in them, like fungi, like bacteria, like certain insects, etc. So this is all comes about from the fact that the plant believes it's been attacked by the chitin. And what as a result of that is, from the peer-reviewed papers would appear that one of the main things is this chitinase production, which the research suggests is then basically increases the resistance to phytopathogenic fungi. Now we have to cover this. This is outside of what I'm talking about, biostimulants, because that's more about the abiotic control. But this is a major part of chitosan and all the research involved. So we need to cover this area. And the enzyme chitinase, as you can read, there's a glycanohydrolase, and this is affecting the constituents of the fungi itself. It's breaking it down, and it does it without causing any damage to the plant. So it's a very interesting attribute of what chitosan creates, this reaction to produce, the organisms produce chitinase to break down these other organisms. If we didn't have the chitinase, we would have huge amounts of arthropod shells and crab shells, etc. everywhere. The chitinase is needed to break that down from those organisms. So that's why it is available, and that's where it has its effect on, in terms of beneficial effects for plants. That's the chitinase. So again, the impact is suggested that the chitin or the chitosan triggers the chitinase, and the chitinase then impacts on organisms like bacteria and fungi and nematodes, insects and viruses, all which have chitin as part of the makeup. So this chitinase is impacting on that in various ways, and you read different reports in different papers, but it can be quite devastating to those organisms. So I believe chitinase has a lot of future potential across the board, not just in sports amenity turf, but it needs more research and defining more about how it does it. But these are some of the bullet points that have come out of the papers. Chitinase is among the most effective biocontrol agents in controlling phytopathogenic fungi. Chitinases can be implicated in strengthening plant immunity by the expression of desired chitinase, resulting in enhanced activity and sensitivity against pathogens. So quite strong applications in the future there. So a summary of the Chitosan research. I would suggest that it has real benefits in terms of increased plant health to enhance resilience to disease pressure. Natural raw material, biodegradable, no buildup, so that fits perfectly, with current sentiment in terms of the environment. And Chitosan already present in healthy soils, so there's no issue with biodegradability. And increased health proven to enhance resilience to abiotic stress. We saw the results there, and there are many cited examples in the peer-reviewed paper, which will be after this. There we have the enhanced resilience to biotic stress and any perturbations, which include viruses, fungi, bacteria, and nematodes. This is just what the papers report. And on that note, if there are any questions, I'd be very happy to answer them.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, we've got a couple of questions that have come in. I've got to be able to read them on my screen now. So we've got first question: titanium oxide is a component of some turf pigments. Would you see a similar effect with these?
In terms of titanium oxide, we need it to be more available, and it has to be broken down with weak acids, ascorbates, etc. So I'm not certain, if I'm quite honest with you, how the titanium oxide would affect. I don't think it would have any impact on the turf, titanium oxide, as a pigment in itself. These products that we're talking about in terms of titanium are refined in a different manner. They're a different type of formulation where it's more plant available, whereas the oxides are not available in terms of those pigments.
Okay.
I don't know if that's answered the question or not, but there are many peer-reviewed papers cited and referenced after this, which might hold the answer in a bit more definitive way. But I personally don't believe titanium oxide pigments used on turf will have any impact whatsoever. They're totally different formulations of products. This is a different formulated product.
Okay, I don't know whether that answer's right or wrong, so I can't help you out there, sadly. Another question from the listeners. What scenarios within sports turf would be equivalent to the salt stressing used in the Chitosan trial?
So in terms of that, we're just looking at the impact of an abiotic stress. Whether it be the buildup of various salts through a lot of irrigation and salt buildup due to the water types, etc., or whether it be sodium chloride. It's just the impact of the Chitosan to actually produce this osmolyte type effect within the cell structure to maintain the cell's osmotic potential and to not release or come under stress from the external salts.
Okay, I'm nodding like I know what you're talking about. So
I don't know if that answered the question. I mean, it was asking in terms of we have salt stress in different countries. Is a totally different thing, like Middle East and that, high salinity soils, things like this. But we have different salts which cause the same impact with calcium, magnesiums, and still sodiums here, which can impact. So the Chitosan is just showing in terms of those trials under a set circumstances of abiotic stress with the sodium chloride that it can create this osmotic potential and maintain the integrity of the plant cells.
Okay. You say that titanium can be antagonistic at high levels of iron. What does this actually mean in practice?
What it basically says, if there have been some heavy applications of iron-based products, then you're unlikely to see an impact from the titanium, because there'll be no space for the titanium to react and to get into the plant system, into the plant fluids on the ligands, that to have an effect. So if there's been heavy applications of iron, it won't work. I'm not saying no applications. You know, normal standard fertilizers with iron content, it works well with that. Post-application, it would normally, from what I've seen, be applied 7 to 10 days later and have an impact, help with the efficiency of that fertilizer usage.
Okay, question, where do these biostimulants fit in terms of seasonal programs?
I think we're trying to second guess when we will be getting what perturbations or stress situations throughout the year. If we're going from a very wet time or waterlogged, coming out of that into a dry time. We've had this recently. You know, the change from anaerobic to aerobic can cause a rush of, you know, oxygen rush into them and can create these problems with the free radicals. And at these points, these are types of stress or cold snaps when we get them. These stressful situations that divert the energy of the turf into maintaining it, or created its own osmolytes and things, whereby we can actually bolster that with these products. Preempting that is hard, but we know when we're coming into dry times, and coming into this spring, these products would have most probably helped quite well, along with obviously normal irrigation regimes, etc., to just get the plants more robust before the impact of the droughts, etc.
So obviously anything requires careful application and timings to maximize the beneficial effects. Have you optimized the product application for turf management?
Well, there are many trials. As I said, there's trials happening now in America. It's nothing to, this is independent trials by people. Trials in the UK. There are documented trials on other grasses, as I said, and we can only, to be quite honest, I think most of the value from all these new products comes from the people who are actually using the products in the field. So all the professional groundsmen who take these products on. We will look at formulations that use the academic studies to give a guide as to where that application rate should be, and the timing and the intervals between the timings. But most of the value from all this, all the information that comes back, is from people who are actually using this in real situations on the turf, on the sports field, on the greens. That is so valuable, really. That is where most of the benefit for the whole industry comes from. People taking this opportunity, taking the chance to use the new products and to actually identify where it works. Because there will be situations where it will work brilliantly and others where it may not. And then that tells us why and how it's working and what the actual correct situations are. As whoever asked the question quite rightly, you know, the timings, the rates, it's very important. And there are set rates, there's set formulations for these products, but by no means are they set in stone, because the value comes back, as I say, from people actually taking the opportunity to use these new products.
Okay, we've got one final one here. What are your thoughts on the new EU regulations in 2022 that will cover biostimulants? Do you welcome them?
Well, I mean, they've defined them as a separate, in separate details now, and there's a lot more details to them. I think we do need to welcome them, because I think it gives the whole of biostimulants more credibility. The fact that we've got the European Biostimulants Industry Council and some really top businesses involved in that now, and it helps everyone to identify what really are the benefits within these products, what are the correct formulations, and it's the whole credibility for these type of products, because we need it, because these are like the next piece in the jigsaw. We've got the macronutrients sorted, trace elements, foliar feeding, etc. Now these play a key role now in terms of we've identified more of the makeup of the products, in terms of what the differences are in things like seaweed and things like this, and we need to have regulations around them which categorize them for the user's benefit as to what are the correct products, and this is a step in the right direction. I welcome them. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, that's all we've got time for on the questions front today. I'd like to say thanks, Steve, and would ask you to move your slide forward so that everybody can see the CPD credits. There we go, lovely. So if you are on the CPD program, please claim your credit for attending this webinar. This webinar will be available in the members area of the BIGGA website within the next few hours if you want to re-listen, re-watch. We thank you for joining us, and we hope that you'll join us again soon. For details about future Continue to Learn Extra webinars, please visit the What's On page of the BIGGA website. So thank you very much, and we'll see you all again soon.